In recognition of International Day of Education on January 24th and World Day of Social Justice on February 20th, we are thrilled to have award-winning Canadian author Ryan Uytdewilligen join us to discuss his first children's book entitled This Is Not My Story. The story follows a writer and his main character who set out on an inventive search for the ideal plot. Ryan Uytdewilligen, with his distinctive sense of humor, ventures into metafiction and directly engages the reader, offering an enjoyable journey through various genres. David Hike's award-winning graphic novel style illustrations add a rich layer of visual intrigue and wit for the reader to explore. As the narrative shifts through distinct genres, the book becomes a valuable tool for teaching about literary forms.
Okay, perfect. So thanks again so much, Ryan, for joining us today to talk about your awesome book for young readers. So this is not my story. Um, yeah, so Jen couldn't be here with us today, but she also wanted me to mention to you how much she absolutely loves the book. She's been reading it to her son. I've been reading it to my daughter, and my older kids also took a look through it and thought it was really cool how you had integrated all of the different genres in there, something that they hadn't really seen laid out like that.
Great.
Within a book before, where it's like explicitly kind of teaching those in a fun way. So yeah, so really appreciate you joining today.
Thank you for
The
having
first
me.
yeah, thank you. I was just curious. So I know that that you have your flourishing career as a writer. But what really got you interested in wanting to get into that career?
Well, I've always been a big reader and also a movie watcher. I'm just a person fascinated with stories. I was definitely the kid glued to the TV and then riding the bus to school, having always a book to keep me occupied. My favorite place in the school was the library, so I just lived in that world, and my dream was to open my own bookstore and sell only my own books that I have written. So I'm only up to just under 10. So I think I'm gonna have to write a few more to necessitate an entire bookstore. But I've just always been fascinated with the art of telling stories with different genres, and then even just telling the history of how books and movies and stories came to be too. So over the years, I've been writing in different genres, nonfiction, fiction, and I found myself kind of circling back to the types of stories that I used to enjoy as a kid, whether it was being read to by my mom or yeah, the books that I was taught in school. It made such a big impact to me. So I think I'm pushing more and more towards writing children's picture books and young adult literature too.
Awesome. And you mentioned there that your mom would read with you. Was that a kind of a daily or nightly thing that would happen in your house?
Absolutely, yes. I fondly remember being read to, and a big bookshelf of kids' books that I would always select what I wanted read to me. And so, yes, it was a very formative experience. And I'm trying to remember if there were any very specific favorites that were constant, because I know I would get hung up on a certain book and we'd be reading that one, I'm sure, much to my mother's annoyance, that it would be the same book over and over for weeks or months at a time. But yes, she was very supportive in getting me comfortable with reading and reading out loud to her even too. So I think I owe a lot to her.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that we really value in our house too. And it's always been a routine before bedtime and just a way to really enjoy and just escape, from the everyday into a book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very relaxing and yeah, a way to unwind. It's definitely how I end my day still.
Yeah. And how did so you were just mentioning about wanting to kind of expand into that type of writing for children, picture books. What kind of got you to move into that specific genre?
course. Well, I studied journalism, I studied screenwriting, and then worked in those two, pardon me, realms for quite a bit. And they're a lot more intense and a lot of research heavy and labor intensive. And somewhere in the midst of there, I actually worked at Chapters Indigo for a time, and they stuck me in the kids section. And I really didn't have too much of a knowledge of mostly current kids books, honestly. Whenever someone would come, my knowledge was basically, I'll take you to either the Robert Munch section, or I'll take you to the Dr. Seuss section. Anything in between, I don't know. And so I started to get curious, and I wanted to actually improve and be able to recommend some good things. So I started picking up things in the spare time and flipping through and actually checking out some things and reading it myself. And I really I think fell in love with a lot of books that I'd never heard of before, and authors I'd never heard of before. And then working, yeah, in that bookstore and seeing all the different types of genres, that's really what kickstarted this specific book.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And you had mentioned Robert Munch and Dr. Seuss. Were those some of your inspirations, or, authors that kind of guided you as a child? And are there forms of writing inspiring you today, or are there other authors that you kind of draw from?
Absolutely. It's always I'm always hesitant to bring those two names up because it feels like a given to me that those
Yeah.
shape your interests. But yes, most of what I read growing up over and over were Dr. Seuss books. They're everything works in those books. The illustrations, the strange rhyme schemes, everything is just a world unto itself. And then Robert Munch's sense of humor, I think, is something that I've picked up on because I responded to those books because I would just laugh hysterically or relate to some of the kids in there. And so it's a type of writing that I definitely want to emulate. I want everyone to have a good time when they're reading and laugh out loud if that's possible. And I know he certainly did that for me. Other books, not necessarily picture books, but an American author named Jerry Spinelli. I had read a lot of books when I was younger. I think grade 2, 3, 4, or 5. Pretty much everything that he published, I would get my hands on them because he just wrote from the heart and seemed to understand the psyche of growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some of those books in our house too, actually. In my son's room, he's read them, so they'll be passed down to my daughter eventually.
Great. They're
Yeah,
they're
great.
classics. They were written in the, I think, early 80s, a lot of them, and
Yeah,
yeah, they still really stand up
they
and
still
and hold
resonate.
up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I was going to mention too, because you were saying about humor, and that's something that I absolutely love about your book. I literally was laughing out loud, and then before my sister had acquired a copy for herself, I called her like on a FaceTime call to read her the book, and we were both
Wow.
literally laughing. We're adults. We were laughing at certain
Perfect.
parts. Absolutely love it. Yeah. So that was another thing that I was gonna touch on was why expanding on why humor is such an important part for you to integrate into the children's books. You touched on that a little bit, but yeah, if there was anything else that you wanted to add about why that's so important.
Of course. I've done a lot of background in humor. I've done a little bit of stand-up comedy, sketch comedy, humor writing, and it just you get the best response. And so I love lighting up a room, making people laugh, and I think it's really difficult to do in words and pictures because it's really you have to do a lot of work to convey a joke. And with this one, it just lent itself to such silliness, and so there's a certain over the top tone there, and in my head it kind of yeah, I could hear Monty Python of all things, that kind of tone,
Yeah.
like Eric Idle, and their type of way of speaking is something that really drove how this book came across. So that was definitely a big influence to me. But the overall goal, besides having some sort of educational value, was to entertain and hopefully get some laughs.
Yeah, and I think that too is so important for any type of learning that you're doing, right? If you're comfortable and happy, you're more likely to be engaged and actually learn. So it's like through the humor in this book, children are learning about genres and other, themes that are presented, and it grabs their attention. And I really
Yes.
feel too that like David Hike's artwork throughout the book, it is just so phenomenal to go along with the story and to really, engage the readers. And so, yeah, I just think it was like a perfect combination
Right.
between your writing and his illustrations. Yeah.
And that's what he said too. There's so many different genres and styles that he said it's not every day that you get to do dragons and fantasy and mystery and sci-fi and everything. So he really dove headfirst and had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Um, what else here? Oh, so one of the things too that I was curious and seeing kind of your opinion about. So why was it important for you to have the main character within your story at one point? So taking ownership over creating their story. So was there a specific message that you were trying to send to young readers through having that happen through the teaching of genres?
Of course, yes. Well, for me, that was a very fitting ending too, because he eventually looks back at everything that he went through, and it was a story. I didn't have that ending at the end because it wasn't as obvious to me. And then after a little bit of communication with the publisher, it made sense that yes, it actually was a story. It was something that he overcome. It was uh, a journey, and there's trials, tribulations, conflict, and so I think we can all experience that in our own lives. And
Yes.
pardon me, I'm also working on memoir work myself for the first time, and it's really rewarding and I think almost healing in a sense too. And I think everyone owes it to themselves to look back at their own lives and give it a shot and put pen to paper, because you never know what will come out of it. I think really only positives.
Yeah, and I think it can be very therapeutic too, as you're kind of reflecting on those positive and those negative
Yes,
parts throughout your life, and how they've kind of impacted how how we all have become who we are today. And even like thinking about then taking that next step of what we want to do moving forward. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I really do think that. Well, I've heard actually that people digest everything through story, whether it is a
Yeah.
news story, whether it is a fiction story, but also our own lives. We want to make sense of things, so putting it into that narrative frame with conflict, midpoint, climax, antagonist. That I think it really does lend itself to be able to heal and help and craft our stories, our own stories.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And what are some of the hurdles that you've been experiencing? So you said you're writing a memoir. That's so
Yeah.
amazing. Great to hear. I can't wait to read it. Um, hopefully, yeah.
Great.
I know it
Yes, I hope
takes a
I
while.
hope it's out soon.
But what are some of the hurdles that you've been going through in writing that specifically?
That, well, a lot of detail, I think, is remembering things, and I'm a person who journals a lot, so I look back at notes, if you will, and trying to see what's important, what to leave out, because I think for a lot of writers, it's not coming up with a blank page and struggling. It's always overwriting, at least for me, and
Right.
having to figure out, okay, I gotta take this out. This one, this section isn't really getting us anywhere. And especially for kids books, that's something that I struggled with this book in particular. It could be a whole chapter book, but there was just so much that had to be cut out, and you're very much to the point with kids picture books, so that was a struggle. And I think I'm trying to do with every kind of piece of writing, because I tend to overwrite in nonfiction and my own fiction stories. So I think that's What I'm trying to do is scale myself back and be able to be that self-editor with the red pen and okay, I like this part, but is it really important in serving the story? If
Yeah.
it's not, you gotta cross it out. And that could be
Yeah.
painful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can resonate with that. I am very much that type of writer as
Yeah.
well, writing things where it gets, here's the first draft and then,
Yes.
okay, I need to scale down a lot.
You can
Yeah.
get lost in the details, lost in the sauce, as they say, because there's things that I write a few novels that I've done are historical fiction or take place in a different time, and I love history, and so I get lost in describing a cafe in the 1950s, and then the plot stops, so I can have two chapters where I'm describing the color of the chipped paint on the side of the wall. And like, is this really necessary? It is for me, but maybe not the reader.
And what would you say to young readers or anybody for that matter, when they encounter those hurdles as they're trying to complete their writing? What would be some advice that you would have? Or
Write
anything
every day, I
yeah,
think. Yes,
right every
that's
day?
write every day, be consistent with it, and yeah, make time to be able to do it because once you get into a habit, it's never felt like work to me. Even essays in school never felt like a chore. It was something I could use as a creative expression. But I found the more I wrote and made time for it, it just becomes second nature. It's not even something that I have to think twice about. Like, okay, I'm gonna write now, and I think your brain also gets into that creative juice time. I don't find myself having writer's block because I'm just constantly I don't know, living in writing and doing as much as I can. So I think the more you do it, the more it just becomes second nature. And yes, of course, write from the heart too. Write what you know, write what interests you, write the stories that you want to read and see. And I think there shouldn't be any limit in that. If you want to learn about something that you don't know about, maybe that's a good motivation to get you to learn about something like ancient Rome and read all the textbooks in history to be able to uh, paint that as clearly as possible. So follow your interests and heart.
Yep, yep, perfect. And with that piece of writing every day, and you mentioned about that you enjoy journaling, is that something that
Yes.
you started a long time ago or a recent practice?
Yeah, I think I've done it maybe for about a decade or so, but I do it a little bit differently. I like to uh, write, not quite a memoir, but just looking back. I do it a couple times a year, and I just look back at the last 3 or 4 months, and I sort of jot down more in the narrative form, not so much as a journal, but just looking back at the last few months and then putting it down on paper, and like, okay, these were the conflicts and these were the highlights and this is something that I worked through and this is how I felt and this was going on in the world around me and what influenced that. So it's something that's been an integral part of my life. Now I have a gigantic binder of my life story that I don't think will ever be seen by anybody, but it feels good to put everything down in words, and then a few times I've pulled it back out and flipped through and like, oh, that's how I was feeling in 2015.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well, that's nice. And even some of those pieces potentially people could see if
Yeah,
you're pulling for your memoir. And
exactly.
yeah,
Yes, yeah, it does shape that. It does help me to see what either I was feeling or what's important that I may have forgotten otherwise.
and sometimes even I find reflecting back on your own journaling and writing, especially if it's, from many years ago, because there's that kind of space and time that's happened where we're able to kind of separate ourselves from it. But then when you're reading it, it almost puts you right back there and you're able
Right.
to reflect on how you were feeling in that moment. Whereas just remembering it, it doesn't quite get as deep.
Exactly. I agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah. And what are you working on? So you were saying you're working on your memoir.
Yeah,
Are you
doing
working on
a
any
memoir story, and I have so many different things on the go. I have a few uh, children's books as well. I'm a lover of classic films, so I have a couple of projects middle grade fiction books that are trying to introduce the notion of classic film to kids. So at least giving them an introduction to movies like Casablanca, just to put it in their brain that these things exist. Old movies are great, and hopefully, through the use of having a protagonist their age who is into classic film, they might find it cool or inspirational to do the same.
Nice. Yeah, I absolutely love classic films.
Great.
Yeah, I love watching them, and again, something that I probably wouldn't have been able to find on the bookshelf if I went to want to learn about it as,
Right.
middle grade student. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't expect the whole world to have that same interest, but I know there's like myself,
Yeah.
there's a few kids out there who like that world or are starting to have an interest. And yes, if there's books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to be available to them, I think yeah, that'll keep classic film alive.
Yeah, exactly, filling that gap there that,
Yes.
needs to be filled because it's not currently, yeah,
Mhm.
available. That's wonderful, yeah. And are you planning on doing another picture book for children? Are you
I
thinking about possible
I've
topics?
yes, I've written a few. It's just a uphill battle to get published all the time, and so just trying to find the right one. And I think the success and popularity of This Is Not My Story might help that, but at the very least, yeah, I have how many? About 4 or 5 picture book manuscripts that are always being slightly edited and changed around and just trying to find the right homes.
Yeah, perfect, and I just wanted to mention, because I was scrolling through this morning, just searching up your book again and that, and I noticed that yesterday, CBC Kids Book Club, um, put a post on YouTube highlighting your book,
Yeah,
which I thought was really cool. So I put on the website there that
how wonderful.
clip introducing the book as well. I thought that was really great that they have, found this wonderful book too and are promoting it, and hopefully more kids will get out there and read it too, because honestly it is so funny and it is so educational. Like
Well, yeah, my favorite thing is a lot of teachers have been actually putting posts online and recommending it as a classroom tool, and that really is the biggest thing. Is I want kids to understand
yeah,
genre or just understand what types of books that they like, because that's something I don't remember being really taught until I was older, and so I didn't really know what I was reading. I know I liked books, but I didn't know that it was a fantasy book or a coming of age story. It was
yeah,
yeah, not clear to me. So if this can help, that's what the plan
yeah,
is
and
and the hope is.
a fun way, yeah, a fun way to learn. And so yeah, I think it's absolutely awesome, and definitely, and I'm glad that teachers are using it, because definitely this would be such a great way to introduce different genres. And like you said, getting kids to understand what genre fits with what type of book as they're
Yes,
reading it, right? And finding what they're interested in to promote that read,
exactly.
right? Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add at all, Ryan?
I don't think so. The book is available in many public libraries as well as Chapters, Indigo, wherever you get your books. It's there and it's a lot of fun. And here's hoping to many more books that are funny and educational at the same time.
Exactly.
Thank you so
Well,
much
thank
for
you.
having me.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it.
If you don't want to miss any of our upcoming videos, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below as well as the notifications. And you can also visit our website, chaptersforchange.com, for educational resources and to see what we're up to. See you soon.